Okay, hello, and welcome to this Unit 1, Lesson 1 video on review of exponents. This video will cover prerequisites that you need in order to understand the lessons that we will go over on laws of exponents. So first, we have the definition of an exponent. An exponent is a superscript. That means in typing, a superscript is something that is typed up at the top, as opposed to a subscript. I'll label this superscript, as opposed to a subscript, which is something which is typed at the bottom. Okay. In math, superscripts are used for exponents. Subscripts are used to just name things. Like you can say x sub 1, like the first x value. So since a superscript indicates repeated multiplication, that means 3 is the number of times that 5 is multiplied together. And you can write it with dots, or you can write the multiplication with parentheses. So this is what we call expanding an exponent. This whole expression is called a power because it has the exponent, and it's the most powerful way to increase numbers. If you think about ways in mathematics, operations that you can do to increase numbers, well, you can do 5 plus 3, which is 8. You can do 5 times 3, and that will make it bigger and make it 15. But 5 to the third, which is 5 times 5 times 5, is 125. So exponents are like the quickest way to make numbers really, really, really big. The base is the number at the bottom, which is 5, and the exponent is the 3. It tells you how many times to multiply the base. If you are asked to expand an exponent, that means rewrite it as a multiplication problem. So if we're expanding a to the fourth, b to the second, that means we are multiplying a 4 times, and we are multiplying b twice. And the reason that we put a multiplication between the a's and the b's is because in mathematics, when you write two letters next to each other with no symbols, or a number in front of a letter, indicates multiplication. That's understood to be multiplication. So expanding is writing it out, making it bigger as a multiplication problem. If you are asked to evaluate or simplify, that means use PEMDAS and work out everything you can. So if it's letters like this previous example, I wouldn't ask you to evaluate that unless I gave you numbers to put in places of the letters to substitute. But here you only have numbers, so you can work it out and evaluate it. You can do, as it says here, -2 to the third means -2 times -2 times -2. And then times 3 squared, we're going to multiply by 3 twice. So we work that out using order of operations. It's all multiplication, and multiplication and division we do left to right. So -2 times -2 is 4. -2 times 4 is -8. 3 times -8 is -24. And then when we multiply that by 3 again, we get -72. That's one of the ways to look at it. Another way that you could possibly look at it is the fact that multiplication is commutative. You can multiply in any order. We have 3 negatives here, and we discussed in our warm-up that when you have an odd number of negatives in your problem of multiplication, that means that the answer is going to be negative. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. 3 times 3 is 9, and so you also get -72 if you work it out that way. So that's evaluating or simplifying. It means work it out and see what the final answer is. Okay, reviewing what we discussed in our warm-up. If a negative is in parentheses and it's raised to a power, then the negative is also raised to the power along with the number in the base. The negative is part of the base. If the negative is not in parentheses, it is not raised to the power, like this example. So we're going to look at both of these and see what the difference is between them. -2 in parentheses to the fourth power means -2 times -2 times -2, 4 times. The negative is in parentheses, so it's part of what is raised to the power. Before we work about the numbers, we can look at the negatives, and since there are 4 of them, that's an even number, they're all going to cancel out because every 2 is going to cancel out and make a positive. So we know we're going to have a positive answer, and 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. But in this example, in the second one, the negative is not in parentheses, so we have to follow order of operations, which says that a negative, meaning adding a negative, meaning subtraction, versus an exponent, exponents come before subtraction. So this means basically we do 2 to the 4th first and then make it negative. The negative's not in parentheses, so it is not raised to the 4th power, only the 2 is. And 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. There's only one negative, which means the answer is negative because there's an odd number of negatives. And then the last is just kind of a little summary about raising negatives to odd or even powers. If a negative is raised to an odd power, that means the result is going to be negative. Kind of like up here when we did -2 times -2 times -2, and we got a -8 because there were 3 negatives. 2 of them canceled to make a positive, and then the last negative turned it negative again. If a negative is raised to an even power, the result is going to be positive because every 2 negatives cancel to make a positive. Kind of like in this example right here. These 2 negatives canceled, these 2 negatives canceled. If the negative is not in parentheses, the result is always negative. Kind of like in this example, the negative was not in parentheses, so the negative is 1 time, which is an odd number of times. So the answer should be negative, and I forgot to write my negative there. So that is fixed now. Negative 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is negative 16. So that is what we have discovered and worked on today with our laws of our first definition of an exponent. We will start on our laws of exponents in the next lesson with the product and quotient of powers.